Hello, welcome back. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Tracy, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the phenomenon of imaginary friends. And we're also going to kind of decide, what is it? Is it imagination? Or is it paranormal? Or is it a mental thing? You let me know after watching this video, so stay tuned. So an imaginary friend is a friendship that takes place in the imagination rather than in the external physical reality. So people usually have imaginary friends between the ages of 3 and 8 years old. Sometimes imaginary friends do stick around into the teenage years, and even rare cases, some people have had imaginary friends that last throughout their entire lives. So, I'm just kind of curious, what do you think are imaginary friends? Do you think it really is that person's imagination, just coming up with this person or animal or whatever it happens to be? Or do you think it might be something like a spirit talking to the children or the people who have the imaginary friend? So leave your comment down below, because I'm still a little up in the air. I'm not real sure what to think about it. I think it is possible that it happens in both ways. Maybe some cases of imaginary friends are truly a case of an active imagination in a child. But I also think it is possible that some cases of imaginary friend could actually be someone talking to either a spirit guide or some other type of spiritual being. I think that is also a possibility. So just let me know what you think down below. Throughout time, the idea of imaginary friends has reached people in different types of ways, and therefore the general outlook of the people with imaginary friends has changed over time. It used to be that it was believed by the psychologists in the medical community that imaginary friends were the product of some type of social deficit, where these people were just introverted and shy, and generally that was not socially good or acceptable. So therefore, they just didn't believe that the children who experienced imaginary friends were of the same intelligence level as other children. Now, if you travel also through time, you would find people who believed that their children were possessed or speaking with the devil or something like that, when in fact they just had an imaginary friend. And that imaginary friend would go away just like any other child's imaginary friend. It is believed that if the imaginary friend goes on for too long, a lot of psychologists or doctors would say that that child would need some type of help. And that might be the case, but I just think that if it is imagination, that's not a bad thing. It may be healthy as long as there is no actual mental disease involved. So anyway, so then also throughout time, so we have people thinking it's like a demonic possession. Some people think that it's some kind of deficit socially. And then in the 90s, the idea had kind of shifted into that of children who had imaginary friends are now generally believed to be just more creative, and in some cases even have higher intelligence than the average child. So now the imaginary friend does not have as much of a stigma around the idea. Now it is viewed as something that is actually very creative, because the child then has a very strong and active imagination, because they are actually creating a friend and having real experiences and conversations with this friend in their imagination. Personally, I can understand why some parents might be just a little bit freaked out at their children having a conversation with someone who isn't actually there. When my daughter Celeste was 3 years old, she also had an imaginary friend who she called Dee Dee. And I realized that she had this imaginary friend one night while we were just doing our bath routine. And Celeste started talking and laughing and said, "Did you see that, Dee Dee?" And just kept laughing. And I just kind of brushed it off the first time I had heard it. But then after a little more time, she was still playing, and she had mentioned the name Dee Dee once again. So this time I decided to ask her. So I said, "Hey, Celeste, who is Dee Dee?" And that is when she told me that Dee Dee is her little friend. Um, I wasn't too freaked out by it because in my mind I just thought, well, it's probably just an imaginary friend. Um, so I wasn't really that worried about it or scared, but I could see how some people, with everyone being different, how some people could be rather scared or startled at the fact that their child is talking to someone who isn't actually there. Because I have witnessed it, and they really are carrying on conversations. Because after I realized that Dee Dee existed in Celeste's little world, I began to just kind of observe and just kind of noticed her once in a while having conversation or playing with her toys along with her imaginary friend, Dee Dee. Since I wasn't too creeped out about Dee Dee, Celeste's imaginary friend, I decided to ask some questions. So I asked Celeste, "What does Dee Dee look like?" And so she told me that Dee Dee is very small, about this big, and that Dee Dee also has purple hair and green clothes. So the description of Dee Dee that I received was that Dee Dee was very small with purple hair and green clothes. So it was actually rather cute because sometimes I would try to interact with Dee Dee, and Celeste would just laugh at me because I would always be looking at just the wrong place when trying to face Dee Dee and have a conversation. So over time, I just kind of stopped trying to communicate with Dee Dee myself. But it is said by many doctors and studies and things, that many children actually know that their imaginary friends are, in fact, make believe or imaginary, and therefore that they understand that they are the only people who can actually see and hear their friend. Um, Also, it is said that a lot of the kids just simply forget about their imaginary friends. And a lot of times they forget altogether and don't have a memory at all of their imaginary friend until their parents or siblings or someone else tells them about it later in life. And then it might jog a memory for them in that way. So I kind of found it interesting as well that as the kids forget about their imaginary friends and move on, that not only do they move on, but they completely forget about the experience in a lot of cases. And that is the case with my daughter Celeste, who is now 16 years old at the time of this video. And so she now knows about her imaginary friend Dee Dee because I have reminded her through storytelling. But at the time that I first told her the story, she did not remember too much about her friend Dee Dee. But after I actually told a couple of stories, she did start to remember, or at least she acted like she started to remember. So I find that rather interesting about imaginary friends. Now, there is something a little spooky about my daughter Celeste's imaginary friend when she was 3 years old. Fast forward some years, we ended up moving out of the house that we lived in when she had her imaginary friend Dee Dee. And then we moved into the house that we live in now. And only a few months after we moved in, we got a new neighbor to the west of us who happened to be named Dee Dee. Now it gets even spookier because the Dee Dee that moved in next door also had purple hair. I'm going to show you a picture of Dee Dee with her purple hair. So, our neighbor at the house we live in now is named Dee Dee with purple hair, which sounds rather familiar to Celeste's imaginary friend from childhood, who was also named Dee Dee and who also had purple hair. I just found that to be so interesting. And this also might have been a case of my daughter Celeste actually being rather intuitive, because she might have just kind of seen something from our future, something that was actually coming later on. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below about that. And if you know any children, or if you as a child had an imaginary friend, please let us know down below and tell us what you think it was. Was it your imagination? Was it a spirit? Was it a spirit guide? What do you believe an imaginary friend really is? And be sure to subscribe if you have not yet subscribed to my channel. That would make me so happy for all the work that I put into these videos. I love giving you guys the content. So please be sure to subscribe and give the video the thumbs up if you like it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.